Okay, more time. Awesome. So thank you guys for being here. I know it's lunchtime, and so I hope that you're having a good time so far at DevOps. And the topic of today is 10 useful Asciidoctor tips. And I think it's safe to assume that all of you have some working knowledge of Asciidoctor already. If that is not the case, don't worry. You still have access to tons of content in Parlays. Last year at DevOps, we had a couple of talks on Asciidoctor, like introductory talks, going to the basics and the syntax. So if you feel a little bit lost today, just let me know. We'll figure out something. But otherwise, then you can also look at the content later. Okay, so hopefully I have just a little bit more than 15 minutes to say what's going to happen with Asciidoctor. So briefly, this is me. This is my wife and myself. We travel around the world speaking about all topics that are relevant to our workday and topics that we like. And it so happens that Asciidoctor is one of these. So I jumped into Asciidoctor very early last year, and I'm being one of the authors of the Gradle Asciidoctor plugin. If you ever have used this plugin and it doesn't work, please let me know, because then I just have to fix it. I also am the author of the Griffin framework. You might have heard this before. And I have some nice stickers here in front if you want to have them. They are limited edition. But that's all that I want to say about myself. So now let's get into the topic proper. If you have any questions, just let me know as soon as you have them. All right? So I have 10 tips for today. And the first tip that I have is how to be productive once that you are creating your content. Because asciidoc, the syntax itself, is very simple. That's the whole point. It's just a text file and a simple text editor, and that's all that you need. But you want to have some kind of integration once you're writing that document. You want to see how this thing is rendered. Typically, you will target HTML. You can target many backends, but HTML is the most common one. So is there a way for you to write content and then see how this thing is being rendered? Yes, there is. The easiest way is that you pick any text editor that you want. I prefer Vim or some other thing. And you split your desktop in such a way that you have a window on the right side, on the left side, depending on your preferences, you have a browser. And inside the browser, you run this software called Live Reload. Now, Live Reload works like a daemon inside the browser. It is constantly looking at changes in the file system in a specific folder, and once it picks up something, it will automatically refresh the page for you. So the only thing that you have to do in your text editor is just save the file, and it will automatically be picked up by Live Reload and show up on the browser. Live Reload is supported in all major platforms, and is supported by all major browsers. You can pair this thing up with two browser extensions. One is for Chrome, which is much more updated than the Firefox version. So depending on your preferences, you pick the browser. And the nice thing about these extensions is that you can see the Asciidoctor content rendered directly as is in HTML, as it would do if you were rendered to follow the whole chain. So this is a nice workflow to have. The next one that I want to show is build tool integration. There are many ways for you to transform Asciidoc sources into whatever output format you need to, be it HTML, docbook, PDF, EPUB, or some other kind of backend. It's also a good idea to supply to your documentation additional information that lives outside of the documents themselves. This is where information such as what is the current build number, or maybe is the author, or maybe some environment variable such as the current date and time, I don't know, something that lives completely outside of the document. Well, if you integrate your documentation with one of these build tools, then you can make it happen. Preferably, you will go with the Maven plugin. I guess we all know how Maven works. And this plugin is very well integrated. And there's also the Gradle option if you're into Gradle. As I said before, I'm the author. If it doesn't work, please let me know. And there is also a live reload Gradle plugin. So what is the difference with the previous tip that we saw before is that you don't have to have the live reload application running. You just have to point your browser to the directory where the output is going to be, and as long as you have Asciidoctor and live reload working, it just happens. You get everything automatically regenerated for you. The next tip, now we get into the documentation itself, is that one thing that I have seen is that when you write a link, depending on the URL that you're targeting, this can grow very big. And it can also have special characters that the Asciidoctor processor might get confused about. But if you put the whole link definition behind an attribute, then this thing doesn't happen. Then the Asciidoctor processor is happy. For those that do not know what an attribute is, in simple terms, an attribute is a variable. So just let that sink for a minute. You're having variables in a documentation. What I like about Asciidoctor is that when you're writing documentation, it actually feels that you're programming documentation. And the fact that we can create any kind of variables with any kind of values and play with them, you're going to see another tip about this, it makes things much better. So my tip here is that define an arbitrary file. I'll name it _links for a reason, but it could be any name. And in here, you include per attribute as a single URL. And then include that file at the top of your, I don't know, maybe you had an index file, or maybe you include it on top of every other file that you're processing if they are independent from one another. And now you can make use of that attribute anywhere you want to. This is another way for you to remove duplication. If you see that you're using the same URL in two places, it makes sense to put it behind an attribute. The underscore name is also special because every file that begins with an underscore is treated like a private one. So every time that you see an adocfle file, there's going to be a correspondent output file in whatever format you want. So links will probably be HTML. But with an underscore, there is no correspondent output file. So in this way, you can generate, I don't know, some kind of templates or blocks or sections that are not independent, but they are included in some other documents. Also fosters reusability of some content, or in this case, as you have seen, attributes. Blank lines at the top and the bottom. This is one thing that I encounter when writing a huge guide, the guide from the Griffin framework, is that we have separated our guide in different chapters. So each chapter is its own file, and these files may include subsections of other places. So I started using a lot of includes in my sources. The problem is that if I want to write the things that I see on the right side, include and then no space, another include, then the Asciidoctor processor gets confused and it doesn't produce the exact hierarchy of sections that I want. I was forced to put S spaces as you see on the left side. But this is easily corrected. If I put an empty space at the beginning of every document and at the end of every document, then I can use includes as you see on the right side, and it works much better. I guess for me, it reads much better because there is not so much empty space in between of what the things that I want to do. Because these three chapters belong to, I don't know, some kind of the same section, the same part of the book, and I may include other sections later, right? But these two things are separated. If I don't include these empty lines at the beginning and at the end, then I will see a lot of empty space, and then my index file starts to grow, and I definitely don't like to see that. Comment your documentation. So remember that I say something that with Asciidoc, you're actually programming documentation. We saw we have variables. So happens that we also have comments. These are useful things for you and your teammates that are working in a collaborative environment where all of you had to produce or work in the same document. You can use single line comments like the one that you see right there after the chapter, or you can have multi-line comments. And what is great about these comments is that they stay there right here in the Asciidoc document. They never leak out into the output document. So with this, you can tell people, well, don't move this paragraph, or I'm going to rework this. So you leave little notes to your other teammates or to yourself, to your future self, so that you know what's going on and what was your thought process when writing that particular piece of documentation. Conditional blocks. This is another great thing that we can have because of attributes. There are three variants. You can do an if-def and then the attribute name. The square brackets can supply additional configuration or additional settings to this block, but they're usually left out. So what you do with this thing is that you can put an if-def at the beginning of a paragraph, and then you put the corresponding endif so that you know what are the limits of the block. And if, say, attribute is defined, it has a value that is true, then that block is going to be included. And you can also do the negative. You can use an if not def. This is paired with a build tool, makes you deliver, I don't know, perhaps platform-specific documentation. You have the base documentation for your whole product, but you want a section to be included only if you're writing or you're producing documentation for iOS or for Android. Those two things are completely separate from one another or exclusive from one another. You don't want to include iOS and Android documentation in the same file for some reason. You can use if-def and if-not-def to separate these things. You don't have to write two different files. It just can be in the same place. And again, if you include build variables, if you supply variables coming from the build or from the environment, it's much easier to figure out when you want to make one particular release or another release for your document. Callouts in paragraphs. You probably have seen this in a lot of books when there is some piece of source code, and at the right side of your source code you have some bullets, and these bullets with numbers or letters will point later to more information, more metadata about the listing. This is what we call callouts. You can have callouts in your source code, in any source block, but it's also useful to have the callouts inside the paragraph that you're writing. This is just free text. Sadly, there is no native syntax to deliver this thing. But if we reverse engineer what is output from the HTML side, we can trace back our steps and see what could be the syntax, the ASCII syntax to generate something. And this is exactly what I'm showing here. You just say something like square brackets, column, that's callout, and then just give it a data value. The data value, this is the important thing. This is the number, or this is the letter that you want to see in the black or white circle. And then use an emphasis block, just underscores, and whatever thing you want to. The text that is inside here, in again, the text number 2, is going to be gone. It's not going to be seen in the final document. So just put in perhaps the same number or the same letter, that's okay. And that renders exactly what you want to see inside a text paragraph. This trick of reverse engineering also works for any other parts of the syntax that does not deliver you a short way to define something that you want to see on the final rendered document. You can also include raw content. So ASCII contains a lot of default settings and, let's say, native syntax for pretty much everything that you would like to write in HTML. But for those things that are not, or that cannot be supported, for example, including JavaScript, then you can use raw content. There are two versions. One, when you specify just, I don't know, it's just a sentence or a small thing, then you use the pass macro as is shown in the top, or you can use a pass block for crosses, and then you start writing whatever you want, and then close it down with another 4 crosses. This is how, and again, using if-def, this is great. You want to create a book or something that a guide that has to be rendered in PDF, but you also want to include the same guide in HTML and publish on the web. You don't want to include JavaScript code in the rendered PDF, right? Because if I send this pass macro directly as is, it's going to be rendered in the PDF, and that's wrong. But if I surround this with ifdef and give it an environment variable like I'm now rendering the PDF, then this block can be completely left out. But if I render in HTML, I really want this thing to be included. The include macro is awesome. This is the feature that sold me into looking further into AsciiDoc. You can include any file you want to, from any kind of extension, any kind of format. What the include macro is going to do is just grab it, read it as character string, and then just put it there in where the place it should be. You can apply callouts in any source code. Just use the standard comment syntax for that source code. We know in Java it's just 2 slashes. You can comment XML using the standard XML comments. It works perfectly. So the example that I have is something that I use a lot in my guides. Is I'm including a standard production code that lives somewhere. Notice the usage of attributes to shorten the path that I will have to use, because otherwise it has to be an absolute path to the build. And this file, this foo Java, has some callouts inside. I'm also saying, by the way, I'm not including the whole file. I'm just including a snippet of code from the 16 line, because probably I'm skipping the header, the license header of this file. So you can do this kind of stuff. You can combine, you can change the indentation, whatnot. And finally, I'm making a reference to those callouts at the end of the block. And the last thing I have to review, which is almost out of time, is that please follow Mr. HAKI. He has a series of blog posts about awesome Asciidoc, and there are a lot of useful tips like this one. He just posted how to build tables and use the Asciidoctor diagram extension. There are so many things. This guy is very prolific, and he's very close to you, at least for the guys that live in the Netherlands. And he's a native, so he's a very awesome guy. He's very active, he's very energetic. Just look at that, and believe me, you will not be disappointed. So that is all that I have for you today. We still have a couple of time for questions before the next speakers comes in. We just want to take 2 or 3 minutes. So if there are any questions, I'll be very happy to answer them. No? Okay, no worries. So keep enjoying debug. Oh, there's a question right here. Sorry.
Yeah. Would you recommend Asciidoctor for writing a book, tech book?
If I would recommend Asciidoctor for writing a technical book, certainly yes. Specifically, especially because the major publishing companies in the US and some in Europe already accept Asciidoc as one of the formats. So forget about dealing with any Office products. Go with Asciidoc, because the added benefit of being a text file is that when you're working with your reviewer or you're working with co-authors, dealing with a binary file like the Office things for changes is just terrible. It's a mess. But if dealing with a simple text file, then you can use standard tools that we are used to. For example, you can put your sources into Git and use regular peer review and code review tools as you do with your source code. You can use it for your documentation. And that just works perfect for us developers. I will certainly do so. My next book that I'm going to write is going to be written using Asciidoc, for sure.
So how many, say, functionality you can use to cover a template, in a template formatting the text? For example, are you able to provide all tables, etc.?
So the question is how extensible the syntax is for the usual things. Yes, for tables and lists and nested lists and sidebars and putting the images in the right place, everything works. And I will definitely continue to use it. And if you're targeting a specific backend, for example, HTML, works. If you're targeting PDF, works. There are a few things with Gradle plugin which will be released soon, but the whole integration from going from native Asciidoc to a particular backend, most of the time it just works. And there are already books that have been written in Asciidoc that are already out there in publication. So this thing has been battle tested already. If there are any more questions? It's a little bit hard to see without this slide. Okay. So thank you very much for your time, guys. I hope you enjoyed. It's been exciting enough for you to try it out. And if you have more questions and if you have more tips, please let me know, Almiray, or let Mr. HAKI know, and he will be sure to dive deep into the topic. Thank you very much again.